read-only mode.
Hello, everyone. I apologize for the delay. We just had a little bit of technical difficulties here. I will just share just a few housekeeping items before we begin. Just one moment. Thank you for joining the Weekend Educational Series. The handouts area includes a PDF of today's slides, as well as a PDF with details on the following housekeeping items. To ask a question, you can use the question pane on the control panel. Questions will be addressed at scheduled breaks. To obtain continuing education credits for today's session, you must track your attendance by texting today's code to the phone number on the screen. The code and phone number will be displayed at the end of today's session. We now also offer MOC Part 2 credits. There will be a link to a quiz on the slide displayed at the end of today's session. You must answer 2/3 of the quiz questions correctly to obtain credit. After reporting your attendance, you should log into your account at ocpe.mcw.edu and complete an evaluation within 10 days. To view step-by-step instructions on claiming continuing education credits and to see a list of future webinar topics, please visit wichildabusenetwork.org/webinars. Now we will proceed with today's presentation.
Elizabeth, can you give us the capability to share a screen?
I just made Sarah the presenter.
Can you make me the presenter?
Sure.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the good, the bad, and the ugly of technology for our youth. Today's presenters are from the Milwaukee Child Advocacy Center. They include forensic interviewer Lynn Cook, nurse practitioners Kelly Nelson and Lauren Frank, and myself, Sarah Haberlein, who's a nurse practitioner and medical services supervisor. We have no disclosures. Our goal is for you to understand the scope of the problem and possible dangers of the various types of apps available to youth. We will review strategies to protect youth as well as implications for providers and parents. We will explore the impact on kids from not only the advancing technology, but also the increased access to that technology. Additionally, how has new technology changed what sexual abuse may look like?
All right, everybody, I'm forensic interviewer Lynn Cook. I'm going to start off by talking about the scope of the problem that we're seeing here, particularly at MCAC and in our community regarding technology. So to begin, I think it's important to talk about popular culture. We're living in a culture right now that, I don't know if I want to call it paparazzi culture, but it's almost a voyeurism culture, a culture of wanting to see things that are unseen. All of our children are being bombarded with images on a regular basis, and they're having more access to technology than they ever have before. So what we're seeing is that the public is the default, and privacy takes effort. And for teenagers and preteens, this is becoming a particular problem because they're getting desensitized to things like nudity. And we're having kind of an evolution of the expectation of privacy. So I was doing the Teen Dating Summit for 3 or 4 years when I first came here, and the topic was on digital safety. And from the time I started doing that, sensitized to it to the point where they don't particularly care that their nude images can be found online if they're shared. And we have this issue of going viral. And not only is going viral an issue for our private images, but going viral can open up children to a world of harassment, even if the images or videos that are being distributed are not involving nudity or something embarrassing. Also, this idea of tastemakers. So the audience is now determining the popularity of things that kids are seeing online. So I think it's still rather unclear how things go viral, but the things that do go viral, you know, millions of people are seeing them. And so what we have now is, rather than, you know, small groups of kids in their own communities determining what's popular, what's important, we have the internet and groups of strangers determining what's popular, and a lot of times adults determining what's popular for children. And a lot of times that's for the purpose of making money. And we also have ideas that can travel in an instant, and those can be good ideas, great ideas, ideas that help us connect with each other, or they can be bad ideas. It's kind of become the path of least resistance. So if you want an idea to spread fast, or a picture, an image to spread fast, the internet and social media is the #1 place to do it. And a big problem that we have in the world of child maltreatment is the consolidation of our recording and photographing devices with our phones. So now, you know, gone are the days where you had a Polaroid image that you would have to share over the mail, right? We can now take a picture, upload it, send it to millions of people all within seconds. And this is obviously especially problematic for teenagers and preteens because they have access to these tools more than ever, especially during the pandemic, which we'll talk about. But they also have issues with impulsivity and not thinking through what might happen in the future if an image is collected or stored. We also know that in 2018, so obviously our research is a little bit behind and it's going to look drastically different now with the pandemic, but in 2018, over 45 million videos and images of child sexual abuse material were circulated online. To me, that's a pretty horrifying number. That was twice as much as we saw in 2017 and 100,000 times more than we saw in 2001. So this is increasing than I think anyone could have possibly imagined. And this is including any sexually explicit material of a person who's under the age of 18. 98% of victims were children less than 13. So I think sometimes when people think of child pornography or child sexual abuse imagery, people are hoping that it's teenagers and not small children. But unfortunately, what we're seeing is very young children and people that across the board universally cannot consent to those images being taken or distributed. About 1 in 9 children are approached by a predator online. I think that statistic is probably a little bit skewed because I think it's a lot more common than that, and it involves them having to know that the person approaching them is a predator. But that's one statistic that's out there right now.
So to give a little perspective, in 2019, those 13 to 18 years old spent an average of almost 7.5 hours a day using entertainment screen media. So that's anything from phones, video games, computers, and I can only imagine this number has since increased. The average age that a child first gets their first cell phone is 7. And by 11, 90% or most kids have their own device. So this increased access and usage makes cyberbullying much more of a reality for kids today, in that 1 in 3 are reporting they have been cyberbullied, and up to 70% of kids report that they have cyberbullied someone.
In addition, we know that children can be exposed to pornography as young as age 6, probably even younger. Obviously, the younger the child, the less capable they are of explaining what they're seeing. But most children have viewed pornography by the age of 18. And it can be as simple as Googling the word blonde, and then clicking Google Images, and you can see nudity just from that type of Google search. So the impact of living virtual, we've been talking about this a little bit already, but all of our technology can be used as tools and weapons. So we're obviously not saying all technology is bad. I mean, technology is used by kids and teenagers as freedom of expression, to create art content and share art. For education, especially in areas where education is less accessible, for safety, to reach out and get support, especially during these times, to stay connected. I interviewed a child the other day who was talking about how it just feels safer to connect with people online for her because her anxiety is really bad in person, and it's only gotten worse during the pandemic. So most of her friends are people all over the world that she games with. Like we talked about, ideas are communicated through imagery with social media, and we're also seeing sexting kind of as the new social currency. I mean, some kids are even trading nudes as baseball cards. Like, do you have one like this? Because if I give you one like this of this kind of thing, then you can trade me for one like this of this kind of thing. And we have a decentralized means of influence. So whereas before the people that most influenced teenagers were their own peers who were in their peer group or in their school or had common interests or common activities, the people that are influencing children are adults, and a lot of it is tied into advertising and money, and that's particularly problematic. And then there's this sense of anonymity, which really contributes to our cyberbullying, but also our sexual predators online, because you can be anyone that you want to be on the internet. And most people that have social media profiles are doing things to change their image and their profile, even when it's innocuous. And we worry that it's causing issues with empathy because, what we used to see in school with bullying is you'd walk up to somebody and you would say something like, "You're fat." And you'd have to see that person's face change in front of you. And you would feel that feeling in the pit of your stomach when you said that to them. And you would probably think twice before doing something like that again because you had to see the way it impacted somebody. We're not seeing that anymore. We're seeing these kinds of things and comments being made from sometimes other states where they don't have to see the impact that it has on the person in front of them. So I'm just going to list like some of the types of exploitation and victimization that we're seeing. We've already talked about cyberbullying. Sexploitation is, something that we really started to see. I would say, when I was at the district attorney's office, we were starting to see this around like 2012, 2013, and it's only more recently actually become criminalized in a meaningful way. But this is essentially blackmailing using images. So we've seen this in cases where someone has posed online as a peer or like friended a whole bunch of kids in a particular high school, so it looked like they went there, and then they have a fake profile and they elicit sexual images, and then they threaten, if you don't meet me in person, I will distribute these images, and then they meet in person and the child gets sexually assaulted. We're also seeing a lot of non-consensual pornography distribution, also previously known as revenge porn, which is essentially there's cooperative sharing of images with like a romantic partner that are then later distributed. And that was only criminalized in April of 2014. Child pornography is a huge issue on the internet right now. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And when we're talking about child pornography, there's child nudity, there's child erotica. Child nudity is just mere nudity without anything sexually explicit. Child erotica might be images of children with clothes on, but you can see through the clothing, or they're in sexualized positions, but they have their genitalia covered. And then we have child pornography. And to be clear, that's images of children being sexually abused or children being made to masturbate. And it's not just mere nudity. We're seeing a lot of catfishing, which I think is a popularized term, but it's basically people creating profiles and websites to make themselves look younger and more attractive to befriend children and young people who are vulnerable. Doxing is the sharing of private information online, so sharing of private facts to blackmail or embarrass or humiliate. Hacking is a big one. We see webcam hacking, and then we also see iCloud hacking, which is another way to get nude images. We saw this a lot with celebrities. There is a whole Celebgate and the fappening thing that happened where people hacked into like Jennifer Lawrence, and there was a few other celebrities, and got nude images of them and shared them. And despite those terms there, that's that's criminal activity. It's unfortunately very easy to hack in iCloud. Children think that if images are not stored on their phone that they can't be obtained because they're in the cloud. But in order to hack an iCloud, you only need a date of birth, an email address, and to be able to answer 2 out of 3 security questions. And most of that information is found on the profiles that children have for social media. We're also seeing a lot of using computerized devices to commit sex crimes, to meet up with children in order to commit those crimes. A lot of grooming, and this is interfamilial too. So we're seeing this with, I know I had one case where the father was using Minecraft to desensitize the child to incest, essentially, because apparently that's something you can do in Minecraft. And then we see a lot of voyeurism or invasion of privacy. So using phones, using cameras to look at people that don't want to be seen in private situations. And then finally, we are seeing a ton of trafficking and sexual exploitation using the internet, which we'll talk about in just a minute. So there's a lot of different ways that sex offenders are using the internet in a negative way to perpetrate on children. And the first one is to build rapport. So a lot of times kids and teens will post their vulnerabilities, like if they're feeling depressed or if they're lonely or if they're having a bad day, or even just things as simple as innocuous as posting about their interests. So let's say somebody knows that a child likes a particular band. They might get a message and say, hey, I'm a photographer. I photograph this band. Next time this band's coming to town, I'm going to photograph them. If you want to meet up with me ahead of time, I can take you with me. That sort of thing. So they're using things that kids post in order to build rapport with them. To build trust. So a lot of times we see that with being supportive, always agreeing with the child, alienating the child from parents, saying, oh, your parents don't understand, but I do. Your friends don't understand, but I do. Like I said, normalizing the child, slowly introducing sexual content through games, giving advice, like you can ask me anything you want about sex and I'll tell you the truth. I know your parents won't tell you. We also have a pretty pornified culture that does a lot of the grooming for offenders. For example, there's a lot of websites with Disney and cartoon pornography. So your parents didn't show you the real Aladdin. I'll show you the real Aladdin. And it's a pornography that looks like the movie Aladdin. A lot of that content is also getting onto YouTube. So kids get in kind of a wormhole of YouTube where they're just clicking on the videos on the side of the screen and they get more and more inappropriate as they click on. GTA, Grand Theft Auto, is one I hear about a lot in interviews. Grand Theft Auto, actually, there are scenes where you can rape a prostitute in the car in that game. So it's like part of the play of that game. Continuously assessing the child's vulnerabilities, responsiveness, and the risk-taking potential. So they're kind of secret testing kids as well. And it's not necessarily with the sexual abuse, but with other things like, if I told you something, will you promise not to tell anyone? I'm feeling suicidal, or I stole this from a gas station the other day, just to see if they'll share their secrets before moving on to more egregious forms of sexual abuse. And the pandemic has had a very significant impact on sexual abuse online. We're seeing increased access to technology and also less supervision. So kids are all given tablets and they're on them constantly. And I know the school's laptops that they're sending out are oftentimes fairly protected, but kids are still getting a hold of things they shouldn't be. And oftentimes if in the middle of the school day, a device fails or isn't charged, kids are getting on other devices that don't have those same safety precautions put into place. NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, reported a 106% increase in exploitation findings in March of 2020 versus in 2019. So we're seeing huge increases. Most kids have their own devices at this point, and they're able to evade firewalls. Some require parents to actually actively go in and set up security, which is confusing or difficult even for us. You know, we're having problems setting up a webinar, so how can, you know, expect parents who have not ever previously navigated this kind of technology to know what security settings need to be set and what's not automatically done for them. And parents are working. They're working from home and they're not able to pay attention. They can't sit with kids while they're watching a YouTube video to make sure the next thing they click on doesn't have anything inappropriate in it, or to make sure that no one's commenting them on a chat of a gaming device. They're busy. So a lot of times they're using the internet as a break in the day so that a parent can get out of a meeting or get something done. And we're seeing a lot more children accessing inappropriate content right now. So I'm going to run through some of the different categories of apps and some particular ones to look out for. So we have our chat apps, we have our photo sharing apps, we have live streaming, and then we have secrecy and disguise apps, so apps that hide pictures, and then we have our gaming stuff. So these are all icons to pay attention to because they're ones that are most popular right now, that a lot of kids are using. A lot of these are chat apps, and they emphasize, like I know Whisper on the website emphasizes the ability to talk and meet strangers. So in terms of chat apps, these are the ones we're seeing quite a lot. I'd say Kik is by far the most prevalent one at this time. So Telenym users are sending and asking questions. It can be anonymous or not, and they can easily come across adult themes on here. There are some filters, but it's easy to get around filters, especially with all the acronyms I'm about to show you. There's no age verification, so and accounts are set by default to public. So you have to actively go in and make things private, otherwise they can be contacted by anyone. And it does share location. Kik, again, allows anyone to direct message your child, and it doesn't require age verification either. Users can create anonymous accounts, and there's unlimited access to anyone, anywhere. There's also built-in things that can be used for grooming, like games and video access. Chat roulette, I think kids think is kind of a fun one, because basically what happens is you go on there and then it randomly connects you to someone else's live video. And I've pulled this up on other trainings before, and it's horrifying how quickly you are connected to someone who's masturbating. So I just put this on here just kind of for fun because I had never heard of most of these, but these are all the different acronyms that I think can be used to kind of bypass filters, or could be so parents or caregivers or even sometimes police don't know what's being referred to. So you guys will get a copy of this. I don't need to go through them, but there's sugar pic. I mean, that's a request for a nude, essentially. I'm posting naked, also about nudes. Want to trade pictures. Live streaming. So this one's become particularly problematic for law enforcement because it's not memorialized in the way that text messaging or picture sharing might be on other apps. So you can't subpoena and find a live stream that's memorialized somewhere that can be used as evidence. So this is an example. There's YouNow, LiveMe, ManyCam, there's Facebook Live. ManyCam actually has Skype pooling programs, so it can allow the user to substitute a random video as their own Skype interaction. So a lot of kids will say like, oh, well, I know it's a child because I Skyped with them, or I met them on Facebook Live, or we did FaceTime. But there's apps that allow them to change their image through those different social media apps. These allow streaming and live broadcasts and the ability to earn currency from fans, which motivates users to up the ante on their content to make it more salacious and to earn more currency. There's no control over who is viewing the streams, and obviously the goal is to grow the fan base. And there's a lot of this going on right now in terms of nudity on the internet, how to get away with posting nudity, and how to continue to post things that are going to get more and more views. So this inappropriate content is very accessible, and we're unable to filter live content, and there's an ability for anyone to interact with the broadcaster. So that could be like grooming, positive comments, compliments, or negative kinds of cyberbullying things. There's also a lot of accidental sharing of even location information depending on where you're filming. So you could be filming outside of your house with your address present, something that could clearly be seen from from looking down from above from a satellite. And a lot of these are using geolocation to share videos where you can identify the exact location. We also have our gaming apps. We're seeing these a lot with grooming because adults are on here with children at the same time. There's little to no parental controls on here. Twitch, for instance, has a 13-year age limit, but all you need to do to sign up is enter a birthday. So most of these age verification things can be bypassed. And so a lot of these are mixing adults and children together and allowing chat with strangers. In 2019, we found 41% of users report being between the ages of 16 to 24, but many are much younger. And I'm also hearing from a lot of kids that they're making money off of gaming and like YouTubing their gaming. So it's become it's a very interesting world. Photo sharing apps. I would say a majority of the kids that I meet and talk to are not using Facebook anymore. They use Facebook to connect with family, but basically everything else has gone to Instagram and Snapchat and some of these other things. So Instagram is the second most popular social media for teens. There's hashtags that have nudity on them. So Instagram is filled with nudity. Over 57 million posts, including clips of pornography. Hashtag porn girls has over 300,000 despite the no nudity policy. And there is, I think, a lot of well-intended pushback about what nudity is okay to have for adults. But the more nudity that's okay to have for adults, the more nudity that's accessible to children. Also, you don't own your pictures. If your profile is public, they can be used anywhere on the internet by Instagram or in advertising. Snapchat images or videos, they disappear after 10 seconds. A lot of times kids only intend for that one person to see their photo, but these can easily be screenshotted. The person sitting next to the person that receives the image could take a picture on their own phone. They can be used to blackmail, extort. And there's also apps that defeat the screenshot notification. So a lot of times when I talk to kids about Snapchat, they say, well, I'll know if they screenshotted it. And then I'll say, but isn't it already too late at that point? And what if they have this app that defeats the notification? You won't know that that image was collected. Facebook, the main point, I mean, there's a lot of fake accounts on Facebook. And really that could be the case for any of these. And Snapchat, a lot of these are linked up to kids' phones. So if they give someone their phone number, the phone number can be used to find all of their social media information, especially things that are identifying. We've got a ton of ways to hide apps from parents. So it can be as simple as just nesting your folders, like hiding one folder in another folder in another folder, or they can use any one of these apps to hide their contacts, call logs, browsing history, photos that you can only get in through a password. And then geolocation is a huge problem, primarily because most of the children's apps require that the user share geolocation because they want to do targeted advertising. And that's really the case for most of these social media apps right now. More and more, they're starting to require geolocation. But they basically create a map of the child's whereabouts and daily activities. So you'll be able to see the routines and habits. And that's the intent for advertising, but obviously that can be used for things that are more malicious. And these are all obviously also used for Tinder and dating apps like Bumble, which a lot of children I interview are using things like Tinder and Bumble, a lot of teens. So a few things to say about child pornography, and it's kind of a whole other presentation in and of itself, but there is a lot of child erotica and child nudity on YouTube. I'm sure there's people monitoring it, but there's hundreds of thousands of views and comments from pedophiles on these kinds of videos. And they can be innocent videos of just naked children playing in the yard in a sprinkler. But these things are being seen and are getting views and comments from people that have ulterior motives. And those are being posted with ads from makeup and gaming companies that are things that children are more likely to see. So essentially, YouTube is monetizing these videos and images. Even though they don't technically meet the definition of child pornography, there's still a lot of problems with this. And it's a way for pedophiles to connect with each other, to go on to peer-to-peer websites where they will do like a file sharing to share child pornography images. And the problem with those is you have to give some to get some. So you have to like prove that you're a pedophile in order to obtain some of these images. And that then increases the likelihood that people interested in child pornography will also create child pornography and commit contact offenses. So the big one right now with trafficking is skip the games. I know a lot of people hoped that when Backpage was kind of shut down that would be the end. And of course it's not. There's always a bunch more things coming right after that. So skip the games is kind of the new Backpage. These are just some screenshots from, actually this is a program that was developed in part with Ashton Kutcher, the actor, that helps create technology that can help law enforcement find and determine where child sexual exploitation is happening. So you can see here, there's one for Milwaukee and one for, you can see both Milwaukee and Wisconsin. So during the month of February, for example, in Milwaukee, there was 1.5 thousand images of suspected child sexual abuse images or images of child nudity related to sexual exploitation or trafficking. And 1.2 thousand of those were on Skip the Games. So this is a big one right now. In Wisconsin, the total was 4.4 thousand, which is obviously a very large number. This is a case I worked on where technology was a huge problem, but I highlight it because this child was only 10 when she joined KIC, and she was just lonely. She wanted somebody to talk to. Her siblings were older, and they, weren't paying a lot of attention to her. It's the pandemic, and everyone's having problems connecting with their peers. And immediately she joins KIC, and she's contacted by an adult stranger out of state. A lot of times it's really easy to identify kids, even if they lie about their age because of their profile names. They might have their date of birth in them, or they might just be something very childlike. And offenders do the same thing. They create like childlike names for themselves online. That stranger offers support, offers probably what sounds like pretty genuine support to this child, but eventually starts asking for pictures, at first just bikini pictures and then nudes, and then convinces her to move on to video chat apps where he's essentially live streaming himself masturbating to the child. And she would just sit there kind of like bored and annoyed and upset, but didn't really understand the consequences of it. And they had an ongoing online relationship until the child was 15 years old, and she finally realized what had happened and that she was a victim. And she then, I believe, did an anonymous report to NECMEC, which eventually came back to me for the interview. I'm going to stop and see if there are any questions at this point.
No questions.
Okay.
Okay. So what does this look like if you're a medical provider? So first of all, with the younger population, communication and information is super, super important. Unfortunately, not all schools are incorporating body safety with their curriculums nowadays, and some parents aren't having those really important conversations either. So when they come into our office, this is our opportunity to kind of start those conversations and normalize them. So, talking to young kids about safe touch and unsafe touch, that they are the boss of their bodies and that they can say no. Reiterating body safety just in regular routine examinations. You know, it's important that I do a checkup on all parts of your body state to make sure it's healthy, and that includes your private parts. And it's only okay because you're at the doctor's office. You know, no one should be looking there unless you're asking for help. And, you know, and then I ask, when we ask children this, and, you know, we would follow up, what would you do if that happened? And then we follow up with, as far as like, okay, tell an adult, great. It opens kind of up that dialogue there, and, you know, to hopefully kind of get any information if someone's trying to do that to them, or take pictures or anything like that. For the adolescent population, incorporating sexual exploitation and technology into your practice. You know, tell me about the apps you're using. What are you and your friends doing? Keep me current, because I feel like these days, kids, adolescents think that if you're over the age of 25, you're old. So, you know, they like to educate you and, you know, keep you hip. So, you know, just having that dialogue then to see how, you know, see what kind of things they're doing. And then opening it up to, has everyone ever made you feel unsafe? Have you ever gotten hurt? Is something upsetting? You got that ucky feeling in your stomach? And then, you know, hopefully having some dialogue about that. You know, when you're talking about for sexuality and body safety for teens, you know, I know we always ask if they're sexually active, but kind of taking a more comprehensive approach in that and asking, you know, like, what's the oldest person you wanted to be in a relationship with? And, you know, oh, like, did you meet them at school? Did you meet them online? Like, kind of getting a sense of, you know, how they're meeting people, how they're connecting with people. And then, you know, asking if they've ever wanted to run away from home or not had a place to stay. Because obviously, as Lynn alluded to, sexual predators, they feed on, you know, children who have, unfortunately, troubling family dynamics. So, you know, if the next time that happens, that sexual predator will be like, well, you can always come and stay with me. You know, I'll let you stay here. I'll let you, you know, go out and see your boyfriend. I'll let you, whatever it is that they're currently fighting over with their parents. So, you know, that also opens up that conversation. And asking about employment and money. Who do they get their money from? You know, if they say, oh, it's my friend Eric. Oh, can you like, oh, Eric, okay, like, how do you know Eric? Like, where'd you meet Eric? Just things like that. It doesn't have to be intrusive and like an interrogative, but just very conversational. And then, you know, just reinforcing with them from the get-go that the information you do share with me is confidential, unless, you know, you're disclosing that someone's trying to hurt you or might be trying to hurt you, you're going to hurt yourself, or you're going to hurt someone. And you'd be surprised, actually, how many times teens will open up to things like that after you kind of talk to them about that. I mean, some teens, yes, are going to lie to you and they're not going to tell you things. But I've had now on 2 separate occasions where 2 teenagers have come out to me about their sexuality in an appointment, and they told me they've never told anybody before. So it's just really, really important that you create that safe space to have these kind of sensitive conversations, but also, you know, allow that teen then to talk about, you know, things that are happening in their life that they might not have disclosed to someone in their family. And then, unfortunately, trafficking is becoming more and more of an issue. So screening adolescents, even, you know, I was like in the early teens, even like as young as age 12, asking them, you know, has anyone, you know, engaged in sex acts or exchanged sex acts for money or gifts? Do you know if this has ever happened to you? Has this happened to one of your friends? And, you know, just kind of opening up that dialogue there. And, you know, if, you know, they say, I've had children say, yeah, like that happened to me once when I was walking home from school and I ran away and said no. And I was like, that's really, really great. I was like, but if that ever happens again, hopefully not, but make sure you tell an adult or so they can notify the authorities, because unfortunately, you know, some kids might not know enough to get away from that situation. And so, you know, just trying to phrase it like, yeah, just making sure that everyone stays healthy and safe. And so if you can tell people next time when that happens. Talking to parents about having these conversations with their teens. I mean, obviously, you know, people think it's a sensitive issue, but it's a very real issue that's happening. And so we need to talk about it. We need to normalize it to make sure that children are feeling comfortable coming to their parents or another adult. I also talk to parents about having that conversation, or teens about having that conversation with their parents. I mean, I know you don't think your parents are quote unquote cool, but you have to, they just want to make sure that you're safe, and ultimately, sometimes they might get mad, but really the goal is to make sure that you are safe and nothing bad happens to you. And so sometimes I get them, to kind of like reassure, like, okay, like, doesn't mean they're actually going to do it, but at least they'll think about it the next time. And then also teens, about healthy and unhealthy relationships. What does that look like? Is your person that you're in a relationship with like trying to pressure you to do things you don't want to do, whether it's online or in person, not respecting you, not respecting your body? Obviously, that's not something we would consider a healthy relationship. So, just opening up that conversation as well with the teens and like what their relationship kind of looks like. And then for the unfortunate youth that have been a victim of online crime, sexual crimes, or even not, just realizing that sexual abuse material, it's not really removed. It's always going to be there, like Lynn alluded to. It's, it might be away for a while, but it's like it's being multiplied and distributed elsewhere, and it might come up to like later on in life when you're trying, to get a job and things like that. So, and there's also that fear of the re-victimization and living with it, that it might just come up at any point in time, like 10 years down the road when they're in another relationship. So it does not obviously end with that arrest or conviction of that perpetrator. And children will come in with, certain complaints, or the parents will talk about certain complaints the child might be having. And, we might initially attribute it to one thing, but it might be something related to this. For instance, I had a adolescent who was victimized via Snapchat and met up with her, and she was sexually assaulted. And so when I saw her for an exam, the mom noted to me that she was having some issues with her hygiene and wanted me to talk to her about it. And when I talked to the adolescent teen about it, she said that the reason why she was doing that, and she became kind of teary and upset about it, is because she thought that if she had some type of odor, she would be less attractive. So in the future, she would have a less likely chance of being victimized. And that's just, that's just the heartbreaking reality. Sometimes it might be something as simple as like hygiene, but it could be have multiple other factors tied to it.
So what else can we do? Parents have an important role in not only modeling, but also educating and monitoring what their children are doing on those devices. Really consider your own social media habits. Like, what information are you posting? If you're posting about your child or sharing a picture, ask them before sharing that information or that photo. And also just considering the time that you spend on your device, while kind of monitoring the time that they're spending. So really just modeling that good behavior, making sure that you're establishing ground rules. Some good ones are using devices in common areas of the home, so not up in the bedrooms or in the basement. They stay on the main level. Kids shouldn't be taking their devices in their room when they're going to bed, so keeping those on the main level to charge overnight. Also just setting those usage limits or downtime limits. And recognize that if you have turned off the access to a personal Wi-Fi, that kids can outsmart that and either connect to a public Wi-Fi or other close networks. And just monitoring their text conversations, knowing that kids are able to delete all or some of those messages. And really just asking kids to show you their apps and how they work. One of the scariest statistics was that half of teens said they would be a lot more worried about social media if their parents knew exactly what they were doing online. And this is just an example of one of the guides that's out there. It includes the recommended ages outlined in the terms of some of the different apps that are available. And it also just contains some tips or like social media manners on what to post and what may not be appropriate. So this guide gives the acronym THINK to remind the child to pause and reflect upon what they're about to post. So it's asking, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? And is it kind? Perhaps some of us adults should also consider these tips prior to some of our posts. So in addition to the previous recommendations, there are also several apps designed for parental control or monitoring of a child's device. These apps allow a parent or a caregiver to see the child's activities on that device. It can block inappropriate content. You can set time schedules or screen limits in general or for specific apps. You can also view the searches or the keystrokes that have happened on that device. You can see calls and text messages, including those that were deleted. You can view their photos and their screenshots. It has the ability to locate that device, and some of them can also add a panic button so that if that button is pushed, it sends an automated alert to the other device, giving you their location and just a help notification. So some of these have limited free versions, but for most of the features, you need an annual subscription, which is on average like $40 to $50 per year. The parent has the control on their device, whether it's their phone or a laptop, and then can monitor oftentimes several devices of their children or others.
So some recommendations for our youth, advising them never to give personal information or identifying information to strangers. Strangers is obviously a very ambiguous term, but people they've never met, people that that they don't think their parents might want them to meet, or strangers, really just people you really don't know, because kids will argue, well, I know him because I play Grand Theft Auto with him every day. Yes, you never met him in person, therefore you've never, that constitutes a stranger, so to speak. Never agreeing to meet them in person. Predators are very, very empathetic, as Lynn alluded to earlier as well. And they're always going to say, "Yep, I wouldn't do that. I agree. You're right. Your parents are wrong." They're just overly friendly. So, recommending to youth to pay attention to that. Predators stay up to date on the latest trends. What kids are into at this age group, what's super popular, so they can appear younger than they are and also be more likable to the younger youth. And they will use fake photos and fake information to appear younger. They'll start with complimenting and maybe even giving them gifts to gain their trust. Never to send any revealing pictures of themselves or pictures that make them feel uncomfortable. Warn you that they could be prosecuted for the images that are distributed. Now, obviously, as victims, that's most likely not likely to happen, but just reiterating to them that technically the distribution of those photos is illegal, because I don't think a lot of teens may know that. And then, again, images can foul them or embarrass them years down the road. Initially, they don't care about it. It's fine. Like, everybody in my high school can see, I don't care. But then, later down the road when they're trying to get a job, it might flag up, and that might cause a real problem for them. So I know adolescents have a real hard time looking way at the future, but just having those conversations with them can only help. And then lastly, the trust triangle or circle of safety, identifying 3 adults in different settings, that they can go to tell them things. If they're worried or scared or something doesn't feel right, they have that weird gut feeling. So there's a lot of online worksheets for the younger kids to fill out and kind of make their safe circle or their triangle of trust. And if you're one of those people in that child's circle or triangle, just saying, hey, I'm here for whatever you need, and if we ever get into trouble, we'll figure it out, and just kind of having that dialogue with them ahead of time so that they know if they ever get into some kind of trouble or they feel like they're in some, they might have be getting into trouble, that they can come talk to you if someone's, really aggressively coming at them, or, whatever the case may be, just to try and help keep them safe. So here are some of our references. We have some time now for some questions.
Yes, one question. Is there a way to access a list of current apps that are used for trafficking and grooming, since they seem to change so often?
Yeah, for that exact reason, I'm struggling with where a current active list would be. So I have some ideas of who I can reach out to, and I will put something together and I'll email it to you, Elizabeth. But I don't know of anything online right now that is any more up to date than there was a one slide with the 15 apps you should know about, but in terms of sexual exploitation, that screenshot, those are the main ones on there for trafficking and sexual exploitation. But I will look into it and I will get something to Elizabeth.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. That's all of the questions we have at this time. If you want to go to the attendance slide.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing their lunch hour with us today.
All right, and attendees, if you would, someone did say NetSmarts, NETSMARTZ.org has all current apps and phrases. So that might be a resource to utilize as well. Presenters, I will ask you to just leave this screen up for a couple minutes so people have time. If you haven't already, you can now text your attendance code to the number on the screen. Hopefully you will be able to join us for next month's webinar, Physical Discipline and Trauma in Children, with Deb Brettel and Dr. Margarita Lughart. So thank you so much for joining us and for supporting WeCan. Thank you.